You'll have to excuse me, I'm a little ill this week. So hi, welcome to Thursdays, I'm Andrew Johnston. Topic this week is Canadian showbiz. And spoiler alert, this isn't going to be hopeful. Canadian showbiz, or as I like to call it, Canadian blow shiz. Canadian show business is a third world industry in a first world nation, simply put. The fundamental problem with this, with Canadian show business, which is, I will say, essentially blameless, although there are definitely motherfuckers with blood on their hands. There are named people to be blamed for this being as dysfunctional as it is. But the fundamental problem is that we as Canadians have such a vague national identity and culture that there's really no need. There's really no want or need to see it represented in television, let alone a fucking, free weekly. Beyond a free weekly that you could get on your stoop, street corner, that will tell you marriages, deaths, and who's having a fucking bake sale, there is no necessity for Canadians to see themselves represented. There isn't a star system here, really. There especially isn't now. There kind of used to be one, but I'll touch on that in a bit. But there's no star system, and that's not in part entirely to the fact that we just don't have the resources to really, or production values to create one. It is, I do think, fundamentally, I want to really get off with the fundamentals off the top here, that we have what is called the tall poppy syndrome. I don't know if you've ever heard this mentioned before, but the tall poppy syndrome means, the analogy is, and oh god, I love that it's a fucking poppy, and a tall poppy. Who's ever even fucking seen a poppy beyond like a synthetic thing that you fucking, that like dads wear on their lapels during Remembrance Day? Anyway, the tall poppy syndrome means, I guess, that if you're walking past a poppy pasture and there's one poppy growing taller than the other ones, they cut it down. And that is what happens in Canada. The tall poppy syndrome is just, you're not better than me. We're all the same level of shortness growing amongst the weeds. That is the Canadian mentality. I had a conversation recently with an American comedian, Marilyn Rice Cub. I'll throw names out. Marilyn Rice Cub, you may recognize from 24, and also, more importantly, Legally Blonde 2, Red, White, and Blonde, where she played Rena. And she either is or was here filming a show called The Girlfriend Experience, which I don't think any Canadians would be cast on outside of an extra capacity. Anyway, she was saying that she was really enjoying her time in Toronto because, Canadians are so polite. Oh, they're so polite. Everyone's so polite. And I had to correct her. I'm like, no, Canadians aren't polite. No, that's a myth. Myth that Canadians are polite. Canadians are indifferent. Canadians are indifferent in that they are never going to effusively applaud you for anything, like say like, oh, that was great. Nor will they effusively jeer you like, boo. They'll be like, boo. Oh, but that's okay. Oh, are people looking at me? The only reason that we open doors for each other, it's not because we're polite and like conscientious of how we can impact another person's day. It's because, well, I'm not better than you. You're not better than me. Whatever. I might as well open this door. Like, whatever. So when someone does draw attention to themselves, when someone has that mechanism, there's a preternatural adverse reaction to it, I think. So this has been very hard for me growing up as I did watching American television and thusly inheriting an American sense of entitlement and pie-shaped eyes staring at a pie in the sky. The way that I can dumb this down is that in every other G7 nation, as it were, they're looking for what's new and what's next. In Canada, they are looking for what's has and what has happened. Like, if you're a legacy act, congrats, you'll get the gigs. More to the point, here's a little backgrounder. It used to be that Canadian cable, premium cable, like if you had all the cable packages, you had 62 channels. That ranged from Channel 2, which was TV Ontario, all the way to Channel 62, I think, which was like APTN or whatever. This is prior to streaming. And so, out of necessity, you would watch those. That's all you could watch. In between American syndicated programming, which every broadcaster would broadcast if they could, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they're certainly getting closer to that goal right now. However they're skirting those laws, I don't know. But the point with that is, there's this thing called CanCon, Canadian content. There are laws that means that like a certain percentage of your day needs to be filled by Canadian programming. So that made it that if you were Canadian, you were able to weasel your way onto television somehow. There was a certain level of ubiquity, because out of necessity, your countrymen were having to watch those channels. Being on TV was still a thing. This all stopped in and around what I really have earmarked 2009. After that, the internet opened everything up, everyone started streaming everything, and once a nation that had no particular want or need to see themselves represented had choices with higher production values, then who gives a fuck about Canadian programming? Of course no one watched it. But if you were on television prior to 2009, you were, and I think that this is such a perfect term for it because it just sums up the industry and the predicament at hand, grandfather claused into some sort of ubiquity. Congratulations. You will get gigs for the rest of your fucking life because at one point in time, people sort of knew your name. You're a legacy act. You're a fucking heritage monument. You're fucking Lucy Maud Montgomery's house. You're fucking, I don't know, the first TD Bank. If you're like me, who got into the business in 2009, literally, that is like when I really started getting some TV work. So 2009, I used to be on the show on Much Music called Video and Trial. Here's a clip of me calling Kesha a skank.
Okay, Kesha, some advice, okay? Bathe.
It's just so amazing looking back on that because it's literally like boarding the Titanic and looking back at shore as it set off. Before it all just smacked into an iceberg. And I mean, oh god, like now it's like the, what is it, port's end? It's just sticking out of the ocean. It's about to sink. Touching on my point from earlier about how it's not entirely blameless. The thing is, the dirty secret about this industry is there is a cabal of people who this industry's failure works in their favor. Because this whole CanCon thing that I touched on, there's X amount of dollars that need to be spent on actually producing shit, but also X amount of dollars that need to be spent on developing shit. That's where these people fucking come in. There are so many people who make off like hamburglers on this development money that have no incentive to see this success. It's like I certainly relate with like Venezuelan people whose country are basically like run by drug lords. Because that's kind of what this is. That's what my fate is. I'm essentially a low rent, concubine to these people. I want to underline that there is world-class talent. There is world-class talent here. And a lot of it moves to the States, but not everyone moves to the States because another myth is it's not that easy to move to the States. People think, well, why don't you just move? It's not quite that easy. And that's a crapshoot as well. Any success story or whatever, anyone who's moved to the States, who I know and I'll be staying with when I go down probably. So, but anyone who's down there, I can tell you what the financial or whatever springboard to them moving down there was. I can tell you the exact break that got them down there. I mean, and for every one of those, there's like 10 people who, have not had that. We would all want to stay in Canada if we could. Everyone would. Like, everyone likes this country. Like, everyone likes the fact that it's well-maintained and there's healthcare and there's no guns. There are less guns. And speaking of healthcare, that's largely why I'm here right now as well, because I'm dealing with an autoimmune thing. And as soon as it's under control, bye. I told you this wasn't going to be hopeful. I really don't have a solution. Well, the solution is to just keep on doing it, despite whatever. I don't know who said this quote, but it's just kind of like after the Earth craps out, like after the Earth combusts and the universe combusts, something else will take over. Gravity will take over as the dominant force. It's just kind of like after all of this industry, after this entire Canadian showbiz complex, it's more like a plaza. It's more like a fucking mini mall. Combusts, another force will take over. And you're never going to stop talented people being born here and creating things. And so that's all you can do. That is literally all you can do. Anyway, that's it. Subscribe. Click this. I hope I'm pointing to the right side. And send questions. That would be really awesome if I just got to answer questions. That would be so easy. Anyway, bye.